Every morning you wake up and choose to be the same person who went to sleep disappointed last night. You brush the same teeth, think the same thoughts, make the same excuses, and wonder why your life looks exactly like it did a year ago. You've become a professional at being average, an expert at staying the same, a master at managing disappointment instead of creating breakthroughs. The person in your mirror has been lying to you, telling you that who you are today is who you'll always be. But what if I told you that everything you believe about yourself is wrong? What if the real you has been trapped inside a prison of your own making? What if becoming unrecognizable isn't about changing who you are, but about finally becoming who you've always been right now as you sit there? Someone somewhere is making a decision that will change everything. Not tomorrow, not next month, but today. And what I'm about to tell you might disturb you, but it needs to be said. The person you are right now is not an accident. It's a choice. Every morning you wake up and choose to be the same person you were yesterday. You choose the same thoughts, the same habits, the same responses, the same excuses. But what if I told you that in exactly 7 days from now, people who know you best could look at you and not recognize who you've become? Let me tell you about Rebecca. 6 months ago, if you saw Rebecca walking down the street, you wouldn't have given her a second glance. She worked at a small insurance office in downtown Chicago, lived in the same apartment for 8 years, drove the same beat-up Honda, wore the same style of clothes, and followed the same routine every single day. Wake up at 7, coffee with 2 sugars, 20-minute commute, 8 hours of processing claims, lunch at her desk, home by 6:30, dinner in front of the television, and bed by 10 for 8 years. This was Rebecca's life. 8 years of the same conversations, the same complaints, the same dreams that never moved beyond dreams. But something happened to Rebecca on a Tuesday morning in March. She was sitting at her desk, processing her 100th insurance claim of the week, when she overheard 2 coworkers talking about her. Rebecca once said, "She's nice enough, but she's just there. You know, she's like furniture. Been here forever, never changes, never grows, never surprises anyone." The other one laughed and said, Yeah, in 10 years she'll be sitting in that same chair doing the same thing, looking exactly the same. Some people just never change. Now, most people would have been hurt by those words. Most people would have gone home, complained to a friend, maybe cried a little, and then showed up the next day doing exactly the same thing. But something inside Rebecca snapped. Not in anger, but in awakening. She realized that they were absolutely right. And that terrified her more than any insult ever could. That night, Rebecca made a decision that would change everything. She didn't make a plan. She didn't write goals. She didn't buy a self-help book. She made one simple decision: I will become unrecognizable. She looked at herself in the mirror and said out loud, the Rebecca that everyone knows is about to disappear. In 1 week, I will be someone completely different. Now, here's what most people don't understand about transformation. They think it takes months or years. They think you need therapy or coaching or a life-changing event. They think you need perfect conditions, more money, more time, more support. But that's not how real change works. Real change happens in a moment. Real change happens when you stop negotiating with your limitations and start demanding more from your life. Rebecca understood something that most people never learned. She understood that the person she had been for 32 years was not who she really was. That person was just a collection of habits, fears, and excuses that had accumulated over time. The real Rebecca was still in there, waiting to be released. And she gave herself exactly 7 days to let her out. Day 1, Rebecca did something she had never done in 8 years of working at that office. She walked into her boss's office and asked for more responsibility. Not a raise, not a promotion, but more responsibility. She volunteered for the project that everyone else was avoiding. Day 2, she signed up for a public speaking class that started that evening. Day 3, she bought clothes that made her feel powerful instead of invisible. Day 4, she started conversations with strangers. Day 5, she applied for 3 jobs that required skills she didn't have yet. Day 6, she organized her apartment, threw away everything that reminded her of who she used to be, and created a space that reflected who she was becoming. By day 7, when Rebecca walked into that office, something was different. Not just her clothes or her hair, though those had changed too. Something in her energy, her posture, her voice, her presence had completely shifted. The woman who walked in that Monday morning was not the same woman who had overheard those comments the week before. Her coworkers noticed immediately, "Rebecca, is that you? You look different. What happened to you?" But the most powerful moment came 3 weeks later when one of those same co-workers who had called her furniture pulled her aside and said, "I don't know what you did, but I want to learn how to do it too. You've become someone completely different. It's like the old Rebecca disappeared and someone new took her place." That's the power I want to talk to you about today. The power to become unrecognizable. Not fake, not pretending, but authentically. Genuinely unrecognizable. Because the truth is, the person you are right now is just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath all those layers of fear, doubt, habit, and limitation is a version of you that's waiting to emerge, a version of you that's been waiting your entire life for you to give it permission to come out. Most people spend their entire lives managing their limitations instead of releasing their potential. They become experts at explaining why they can't instead of masters at discovering what they can. They perfect the art of staying the same while dreaming of being different. But what if staying the same is actually the most dangerous thing you could do? What if the biggest risk is not changing at all? The reason Rebecca could transform so quickly is because she understood something that most people never realize. She understood that she had been living in an identity prison of her own making. Every day she would wake up and put on the same invisible chains. The chains of "I'm just not that type of person." The chains of "I've always been this way." The chains of "people like me don't do things like that." These weren't real chains. Nobody had locked her up. She had locked herself up with her own beliefs about who she was supposed to be. You see, the biggest prison on earth is not made of steel and concrete. It's made of thoughts and beliefs. And the most dangerous prisoner is not the one behind bars, but the one who has convinced himself that the cell he's sitting in is actually his home. Most people are not living their lives. They're living their limitations. They're not being themselves. They're being their fears. Let me tell you about Antonio. 5 years ago, if you met Antonio at a social gathering, he would find the corner with the best view of the exit and plant himself there for the entire evening. If someone approached him, he would give one-word answers and hope they would move on quickly. Antonio had convinced himself that he was naturally introverted and that speaking up would be trying to be someone he's not. He carried business cards in his wallet for 2 years without giving out a single one because he thought networking was for other people. Antonio's identity prison had 3 walls. Wall number 1, I'm not good with people. Wall number 2, I don't have anything interesting to say. Wall number 3, successful people are just different from me. For 5 years, Antonio lived within these 3 walls, and he defended them like they were protecting him. But then Antonio's company announced layoffs, and suddenly his quiet corner didn't feel so safe anymore. He realized that while he had been hiding, other people had been building relationships, sharing ideas, and creating opportunities. His identity prison had become a trap. That's when Antonio made the same decision Rebecca made. He decided to become unrecognizable. Antonio didn't try to become an extrovert. He didn't try to become someone else. He simply decided to stop being limited by who he thought he was. In 7 days, Antonio spoke up in 3 meetings, introduced himself to 5 new people, joined a professional association, and volunteered to present his department's quarterly report. By the end of that week, his manager said something that shocked him. "Antonio, I never realized how much insight you have. You should speak up more often." The person who had been hiding in corners for 5 years had been carrying valuable insights all along. The problem wasn't that Antonio lacked value. The problem was that he had built an identity around hiding that value. He had become so comfortable in his prison that he forgot there was a door. Here's what Antonio learned and what you need to understand. Your identity is not your destiny. Who you've been is not who you have to remain. The stories you tell yourself about your limitations are just stories. They're not facts. They're not laws of nature. They're just stories. And stories can be rewritten. Most people think their personality is fixed. They say things like, "I'm just not a morning person," or "I'm not creative," or "I'm terrible with money," as if these are permanent conditions. But what if these aren't truths about you? What if they're just habits of thinking that you've practiced so long they feel true? The most powerful moment in Antonio's transformation came when he realized that the person he thought he was and the person he actually was were 2 completely different people. The real Antonio was confident, insightful, and valuable. The fake Antonio was the one who had been hiding in corners, making excuses, and limiting his own potential. Your authentic self is not the person who has been shaped by fear, doubt, and past failures. Your authentic self is the person who emerges when you remove all the limitations you've placed on yourself. That person has been waiting inside you your entire life, ready to come out the moment you give permission. But here's where most people get stuck. They want to change. They decide to change, but they don't know how to change. They try to transform their entire life overnight and get overwhelmed. Or they make tiny adjustments and wonder why nothing significant happens. The secret is not in changing everything at once or changing nothing at all. The secret is in changing the right things in the right sequence over exactly 7 days. Why 7 days? Because 7 days is long enough to create momentum, but short enough to maintain intensity. 7 days is long enough to break old patterns, but short enough that your mind doesn't have time to create new excuses. 7 days is the perfect amount of time to prove to yourself that transformation is possible without giving yourself enough time to talk yourself out of it. When Rebecca decided to become unrecognizable, she didn't just wake up different. She followed what I call the Revolution Week principle. Each day had a specific focus, and each day built on the previous day's foundation. This is how real transformation works, not through massive, unsustainable changes, but through strategic, powerful shifts that compound into something extraordinary. Day 1 is about claiming your new identity. This is when you make the declaration, not just to yourself, but to the universe. You look in the mirror and you say, "The person I was yesterday is not the person I am today." Rebecca did this, Antonio did this, and when you do this, you're not lying or pretending. You're announcing your intention to align with who you really are. Day 2 is about taking the first action that your old self would never take. Rebecca asked for more responsibility. Antonio spoke up in a meeting. This action doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be definitive. It has to be something that creates a clear line between who you were and who you're becoming. Day 3 is about expanding your comfort zone physically. Change how you move through the world. Sit in a different chair. Take a different route to work. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. Your body needs to feel the change, not just your mind. Day 4 is about changing how you communicate. Start conversations you've never started. Say things you've never said. Ask questions you've never asked. Your voice is one of the most powerful tools of transformation, because when you change how you speak, you change how you think. Day 5 is about taking a risk that aligns with your new identity. Apply for something. Sign up for something. Commit to something that requires you to grow into the person you're becoming. This is where faith meets action. Day 6 is about creating an environment that supports your transformation. Remove everything from your space that reinforces who you used to be. Add things that remind you of who you're becoming. Your environment should celebrate your new identity, not mourn your old one. Day 7 is about integration. This is when you step fully into your new identity and let the world see who you've become. You don't announce it with words, you announce it with presence, with confidence, with the quiet power that comes from knowing you've kept your promise to yourself. But here's what makes this process so powerful. Each day doesn't just change you, it changes how you see yourself. And when you change how you see yourself, you change what you believe is possible. When Rebecca asked for more responsibility on day 1, she proved to herself that she was brave. When she signed up for public speaking on day 2, she proved to herself that she was committed to growth. By day 7, she wasn't pretending to be confident. She had evidence that she was confident. This brings me to the most critical part of becoming unrecognizable. You must understand that transformation is not just about changing what you do, it's about changing the story you tell yourself about who you are. Every person carries a story inside their head, and that story determines everything. It determines what they attempt, what they avoid, what they accept, and what they reject. Most people are living someone else's story about their life, and they don't even realize it. Let me tell you about James. 2 years ago, if you asked James to describe himself, he would have said, I'm the guy who tried to start 3 businesses and failed at all of them. I'm just not cut out for entrepreneurship. I'm better off working for someone else. That was James's story. And he lived it every single day. When opportunities came his way, he would say, that's not for someone like me. When people suggested business ideas, he would say, I already proved I can't make that work. James had taken 3 business failures and turned them into a permanent identity. He wasn't just someone who had experienced failure. He had become failure itself. His story wasn't, I tried 3 things that didn't work out. It was, I am a failed entrepreneur. And as long as that was his story, that's exactly what his reality would continue to be. But then something shifted in James's thinking. He met a successful business owner who had failed at 7 different ventures before building a multi-million-dollar company. This man looked at James and said, you're not a failed entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur with experience. The only difference between me and you is that I kept going after failure number 3. That night, James rewrote his story. Instead of, I am someone who fails at business, his new story became, I am someone who learns from every attempt and gets closer to success with each experience. Instead of, I'm not cut out for entrepreneurship, his story became, I'm building the skills and knowledge I need to create something extraordinary. But James didn't just think his new story. He started speaking it. When people asked about his past businesses, instead of saying, I failed 3 times, he started saying, I gained valuable experience from 3 different ventures that prepared me for what I'm building now. When opportunities came up, instead of saying, that's not for me, he started saying, let me see how this fits with my vision. Within 1 week, James's entire energy shifted. He started seeing opportunities instead of obstacles. He started having conversations about possibilities instead of limitations. He started taking actions that aligned with his new story instead of his old one. And here's the amazing part. Other people started responding to him differently too. When you change your story, you change how people see you. And when you change how people see you, you change what becomes possible in your relationships and opportunities. The power of rewriting your story is not just psychological, it's practical. When James stopped introducing himself as a failed entrepreneur and started introducing himself as an experienced entrepreneur building something new, people started treating him like an experienced entrepreneur building something new. Investors started listening. Partners started engaging. Customers started believing. Your story is your reality. Change your story, change your life. But here's what most people don't understand about transformation. Becoming unrecognizable is not the end goal. It's the beginning of your real life. The question is not just, how do you transform in 7 days? But how do you live as a transformed person for the rest of your life. 6 months after Rebecca's transformation, something interesting happened. She was promoted to regional manager, leading a team of 12 people. But more importantly, she had maintained her new identity. She didn't slip back into being invisible. She didn't return to her corner. She had learned something that most people who attempt change never learn: how to live as the person you've become instead of returning to the person you used to be. This is where most transformations failed. People make dramatic changes. They feel incredible for a week or a month, but then slowly, gradually, they drift back to their old patterns. They transform, but they don't learn how to maintain their transformation. They become unrecognizable, but then they become recognizable again. But let me tell you about Maria, because her story will show you exactly how to avoid this trap and live your unrecognizable life permanently. 3 years ago, Maria was a single mother working 2 part-time jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, and constantly stressed about money. She had convinced herself that this was just her reality, that she was doing the best she could with the hand she was dealt. Every month was a struggle. Every unexpected expense was a crisis. And every day felt like survival instead of living. Maria's transformation started the same way Rebecca's and Antonio's did, with a moment of decision. But Maria's story is different because it shows you what happens after the transformation, how to build a life that sustains your new identity instead of undermining it. Maria didn't just change for a week, she changed for a lifetime. And she did it by understanding 3 principles that most people miss. The first principle is this: your new identity must be supported by new systems. Maria realized that if she wanted to stop living paycheck to paycheck, she couldn't just work harder at the same jobs. She had to create systems that generated different results. So she used her 7-day transformation to learn a high-impact skill: digital marketing. She spent every spare minute for that first week watching tutorials, taking notes, and practicing. By day 7, she had landed her first freelance client. But here's the key: she didn't stop there. Maria understood that transformation without systems is just temporary motivation. So she built a system around her new identity. She woke up an hour earlier every day to work on client projects. She invested 20% of every payment back into learning advanced skills. She treated her freelance work like a real business, not like a side hustle. Within 6 months, her freelance income had replaced both part-time jobs within a year. She was earning more in 1 month than she used to earn in 6 months. The second principle is this: your transformation must be bigger than just you. Maria realized that if her change only benefited her, it wouldn't be sustainable. So she made her transformation about something larger than herself. She started teaching other single mothers how to build freelance businesses. She created a support group that met every Saturday morning. She became not just someone who had escaped financial struggle, but someone who helped others escape financial struggle. When your transformation serves others, it becomes more than personal development, it becomes purpose. And purpose is what sustains change when motivation fades. Purpose is what keeps you moving forward when obstacles arise. Purpose is what makes your new identity non-negotiable instead of optional. The third principle is this: you must protect your transformation like your life depends on it, because it does. Maria learned that not everyone would celebrate her change. Some people in her life preferred the old Maria, the one who was struggling, because it made them feel better about their own lack of progress. Some people tried to pull her back into old conversations, old complaints, old limitations. But Maria had made a decision that her transformation was sacred. She stopped spending time with people who wanted to keep her small. She stopped engaging in conversations about how hard life was and started having conversations about how to make life better. She stopped consuming content that reinforced limitation and started consuming content that expanded possibility. She created boundaries around her new identity, and defended those boundaries like they were protecting something precious, because they were. Today, 3 years later, Maria owns a digital marketing agency with 8 employees. She's purchased a home, built a college fund for her daughter, and created financial security that seemed impossible when she was working those 2 part-time jobs. But more importantly, she has maintained her transformation. She hasn't slipped back. She hasn't returned to old patterns. She lives as the person she became, not as the person she used to be. This is what I want you to understand. Becoming unrecognizable in 7 days is possible, but only if you commit to living as an unrecognizable person for the rest of your life. Your transformation is not an event, it's a lifestyle. Your new identity is not a temporary experiment, it's a permanent upgrade. The person you have the potential to become in the next 7 days is not a fantasy version of yourself. It's not someone you're pretending to be, it's who you really are underneath all the layers of fear, doubt, and limitation that you've accumulated over the years. That person has been waiting inside you, ready to emerge the moment you give permission. But here's what I need you to understand most of all. This is not about becoming perfect. This is not about becoming someone without problems or challenges. This is about becoming someone who faces problems and challenges from a position of power instead of a position of helplessness. This is about becoming someone who creates solutions instead of someone who collects excuses. The choice is yours. You can finish listening to these words and go back to being exactly who you were before. You can add this to the list of inspiring content you've consumed that didn't change anything in your actual life. Or you can make the same decision that Rebecca made, that Antonio made, that James made, that Maria made. You can decide right now, in this moment, to become unrecognizable. You can give yourself permission to stop managing your limitations and start releasing your potential. You can choose to stop being the same person tomorrow that you were today. The power is in your hands. The choice is yours. The time is now. What will you choose?